All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something pretty fascinating. It's about the appearances of Jesus after the resurrection. And, we've got these excerpts from a Bible study lesson plan. And, wow, they really got me thinking. So I'm really excited to unpack it all with our expert here.
Yeah, I'm ready. It's a topic that, it still is fascinating, even all these centuries later.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's so interesting about this particular lesson plan
Mm.
is how it starts off. It compares like how we, today think of ghosts and how Jesus is described appearing after, he comes back from the dead. Like ghosts are usually, see-through, maybe kind of floating around, maybe even showing the wounds that, caused their death. They even mentioned movies like Ghost Town and Casper, to give you that image.
It's a really clever way to set the scene, isn't it? Because when you look at the way the Bible talks about Jesus after the resurrection, it's a totally different picture.
It really is. Instead of this, wispy kind of ghost, we see this Jesus who's, physically present. And this lesson plan actually encourages us to really look closely at passages like Luke 24 and John 20. They even want us to do some detective work and highlight all the details about Jesus's resurrected body.
And it's amazing how consistent the details are. Like you see Jesus being seen, being touched. He even invites Thomas to touch his wounds. He eats, he walks, he talks. These are all very tangible things he's doing. And it's not just implied either. Like Jesus himself actually says, I have flesh and bones, which completely shatters that whole ghostly image.
Right. It's not like this, vague spiritual presence. This is a bodily resurrection. And this lesson plan really dives into that idea. It even has these activities where you get to actually examine verses like in Luke 24 that really solidify this idea of Jesus being physically present.
And you might be thinking, well, why is this specific detail so important? Well, this physical resurrection is like a huge foundation of Christian theology.
Yeah.
Because it connects to the promise of believers' own bodily resurrection. It shifts the focus from just, an afterlife to like an actual physical resurrection. And that concept is really intertwined with faith.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not just about Jesus coming back, but what that means for, the people who believe in him. So this lesson plan then jumps to this example that kind of had me scratching my head a bit. It brings up the 153 fish that were caught in John 21. And it even mentions how students always ask about the significance of that number,
Ah, yes, the 153 fish. Well, what's important here, as the lesson plan points out, is not to get stuck trying to decode some hidden meaning behind that number, but instead it's about recognizing the bigger picture. This passage, like many others, it shows this very real and physical interaction between Jesus and his disciples.
So are we just supposed to ignore those details that seem a bit random or out of place?
Not necessarily ignore them, but understand that not every detail needs to have, some deep symbolic meaning. It just shows us a common challenge when we're studying the Bible. It's hard to separate the symbolic stuff from what might just be, part of the story. But the point is that, Jesus' resurrection wasn't just this one-time limited event. It was witnessed by many different people. And these accounts all add to the, to our understanding of what happened.
Yeah, and that actually leads perfectly to the next point that the lesson plan brings up. It emphasizes that that list of appearances in 1 Corinthians 15,
Yeah.
that's not supposed to be like a complete list. And it specifically mentions Mary Magdalene and the appearance to over 500 people. So why is that detail so important?
Well, it has to do with the historical credibility of the resurrection.
Yeah.
Paul, who wrote 1 Corinthians, he wasn't writing to a group of believers. He was actually writing to a pretty skeptical audience. And by highlighting, all these multiple and diverse witnesses to the resurrection, he really strengthens his argument. It takes the resurrection out of the realm of myth and legend, and it presents it as this documented event based on firsthand accounts.
Yeah, that's a really strong point. So moving on, the lesson plan then gets into this theological debate surrounding John 20.28. That's the passage where Thomas calls Jesus my Lord and my God, right? It mentions how Jehovah's Witnesses, who have, some pretty distinctive beliefs, have a totally different interpretation of this passage.
Right. And this is where it's so important to, understand the different perspectives out there. The lesson plan actually does a great job of presenting arguments both for and against, the Jehovah's Witness interpretation.
Yeah.
Which sees Thomas's statement as more of an exclamation than a direct confirmation, of Jesus being God. And it's not about saying one side is right and one side is wrong. It's just about understanding how different theological frameworks can shape the way we interpret these texts.
It really makes you think about how much our own backgrounds and beliefs, influence how we approach these texts. But how did these appearances affect the disciples themselves? I mean, how did they change them?
That's the question that really gets to the heart of it all, right? Because before the resurrection, the disciples were, they were scattered, they were afraid, their hopes were completely crushed. But after these encounters with the resurrected Jesus, they were completely transformed.
It's almost like, those appearances were this turning point for them, right? They went from, hiding and being afraid to boldly proclaiming that Jesus had risen. It's a pretty big change.
It is. It's huge. And the lesson plan, even though it doesn't really focus on, how the disciples changed, it ends with this really powerful question. It asks, do you believe God raised Jesus from the dead in his own body?
Wow. That's pretty direct. It really makes you stop and think about it.
It does, because if we accept the evidence,
Yeah.
this bodily resurrection of Jesus, it has some really deep implications for what we believe. It's not just some event from the past. It becomes this truth that we have to respond to.
So how do those appearances, fit into that? Like, how do they connect belief and action?
Well, think about the appearances themselves. Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene, and he gives her comfort and reassurance. He appears to groups of disciples, and he restores their faith and helps them rebuild their sense of community. And in each instance, there's this clear sense of purpose, like he's sending them out to share the message of his resurrection.
So it's not just this, hey, I'm back kind of thing. It's more like, I'm back, and now it's your turn to go and tell the world.
Exactly. And this mission wasn't just about preaching either. It was about living out the values that Jesus, embodied, like love, forgiveness, radical inclusivity. Now, the disciples themselves were a pretty diverse group. They had different backgrounds, different personalities, but they were all united by this shared experience of seeing the risen Christ and their commitment to his teachings.
Yeah, it makes you think about the power of, shared experiences, right? How something so huge can actually bring people together even when they're different.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the impact of those appearances, it didn't stop with the disciples. It has echoed throughout history. It shaped art, music, literature, even entire cultures. It's really the foundation of the Christian faith. It offers hope and inspiration to so many people, across different cultures and generations.
That makes me wonder, though, is the impact only for people who, identify as Christians? Like, what about someone who might find these stories interesting, but maybe they're not looking at it from, just a faith perspective?
That's a really great question. I think it actually shows how these stories go beyond any one religion or belief system. Even if you don't approach it from a purely faith-based lens, the resurrection stories still ask some pretty big questions about life, death, and just what it means to be human. It challenges us to examine our own assumptions and to think about possibilities that might be beyond our current understanding.
Yeah, it kind of makes you think about that human search for meaning, that desire to understand the bigger picture, even when it feels like it's beyond what we can grasp.
Exactly. And that's why these stories still resonate with us, even after all this time. They tap into something deep within us, a longing for something more, a hope that goes beyond our, everyday reality.
Yeah. Okay, well, maybe we should bring it back to this lesson plan and its main focus before we get too philosophical.
You're right. It's easy to get off track with such a complex topic.
Right.
But the lesson plan, through all those activities and questions, it really wants us to go beyond just reading these accounts passively. It encourages us to really engage with the text, to analyze the details, and to really think about what it all means.
It's like turning a historical account into this personal reflection. And speaking of personal reflection, I remember when I first really got into those resurrection stories, there was this one detail that really stayed with me.
Oh, I'm curious. What was it?
It was actually in that account of Jesus appearing to the disciples on the road to Emmaus, the one in Luke 24. They didn't recognize him at first, and they were talking about everything that had happened. And then when Jesus breaks bread with them, their eyes are opened, and they finally realize who he is. It's just this really powerful image of recognition and revelation.
That's a beautiful example. And it speaks to, the transformative power of encountering the risen Christ, even if that encounter isn't physical. It's about having our eyes open to this new reality, this new understanding.
Yeah, it's making me rethink how I view those appearances now. They're not just about proving that Jesus was alive again.
Yeah.
It's about these profound moments of connection and revelation.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the, lesson plan's final question.
Yeah.
It's not just about whether we believe in the historical fact of the resurrection. It's about what that belief means for us. How does it change our perspective?
Yeah.
How does it affect, our actions?
Yeah, it becomes a much more personal question, right? It goes from just intellectual agreement to a lived experience. It's
Right.
not just about what happened back then. It's about how that event resonates with us today.
And I think that's the beauty of these stories, They keep challenging us. They invite us to engage with them on so many different levels.
Well, on that note, maybe it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've explored that contrast between our modern idea of ghosts and the actual physical resurrection of Jesus. We talked about the importance of multiple witnesses and the historical credibility that gives to the event. And we even got into some different theological interpretations. We saw how our own backgrounds and beliefs shape how we understand things.
Yeah, and I think most importantly, we've been encouraged to move beyond just, retelling the accounts and to really engage with what they mean and what they mean for us. Yeah, we went from being detectives, analyzing all the details, to really struggling with the question of what it all means personally. It's been quite a journey.
It really has, and I'm excited to continue this exploration in the next part.
Okay, so welcome back to our deep dive. We've been talking about the resurrection appearances of Jesus, looking at all sorts of things from, the little physical details to some of the theological debates around it. But I think what really hit me in this last part is the impact that these appearances had. Yeah, it's one thing to read about them, but it's another to really get how they transformed the disciples and how it basically started a movement that's, still going strong all these centuries later.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head there. These appearances, they weren't just about proving that Jesus was alive again. They were about setting his followers on this path that would end up changing the world.
Yeah. And I'm curious about, how those accounts actually show that. What details really point to this idea of a mission being launched,
Well, think about the appearances themselves. Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene, and he offers her comfort and reassurance. He appears to groups of disciples and restores their faith, and strengthens that sense of community. And in each of these moments, you really get this sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Like he's commissioning them to go out and share the message, the message of his resurrection.
Right. So it's not just a hey, look, I'm back kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? It's more like, I'm back and now you go tell the world.
Yeah, exactly. And this mission, it wasn't just about preaching either. It was about, actually living out those values that Jesus embodied. Things like love, forgiveness, and radical inclusivity. Remember, the disciples themselves were a pretty diverse group of people. They all came from different backgrounds. They had different personalities, but they were all united by this shared experience. The shared experience of seeing the risen Christ, and of course, by their commitment to his teachings.
It's interesting, it really makes you think about the power of shared experiences, doesn't it? How something so profound can bring people together, even if they're different,
Absolutely. And the impact of those appearances, it didn't stop with the disciples. It's really echoed throughout history. I mean, think about it. It's shaped art, music, literature, even entire cultures have been shaped by it. It's the very cornerstone of the Christian faith, offering hope and inspiration to countless people, across the globe.
That makes me wonder, though, is the impact only, limited to people who identify as Christian? What about someone who, might find these stories fascinating, but maybe they're not, maybe they're not coming at it from a strictly faith-based perspective,
That's a great question. I think it really highlights how these stories, they actually go beyond just one religion or belief system. Even if you don't approach it from a faith-based perspective, those resurrection narratives, they raise these really fundamental questions, questions about life and death and what it means to be human. They kind of push us to confront our own assumptions and maybe even consider possibilities that are beyond our current understanding.
Yeah, it makes you think about that human search for meaning, right? The desire to understand the bigger picture, even when it feels completely beyond our grasp.
Exactly. And that's why these stories still resonate with us. Even after all these centuries, they tap into something deep within us. this longing for something more, a hope that transcends our everyday reality.
Well, this has been incredible, really unpacking these accounts and, exploring all these layers of meaning and impact and all that. We started by examining those details,
Yeah.
right? Contrasting how we view ghosts today with this very physical resurrection of Jesus. We talked about those multiple witnesses and how that adds to the historical credibility of the event. And we even dove into some different theological perspectives, recognizing how our own, backgrounds and beliefs shape how we understand these things.
Yeah, and I think throughout all of this, we've really been invited to move beyond just knowing the story, to actually grapple with what it means. What are the implications of this for us?
Yeah, it's like we started as detectives, analyzing every little detail, and then it became this journey of, personal reflection, asking ourselves, well, what do these stories mean for me? How do they challenge me? How do they, maybe even inspire me to live differently?
And I think that's the power of these ancient texts. They're not just stories from the past. They're these living narratives that still speak to us today. They invite us to examine our own lives, our beliefs, and our hopes.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up this deep dive. We really hope that this exploration has been insightful and thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit transformative for you.
Yeah. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.